So for today's service, we'll be studying Ezra Chapter 7, and we'll be looking a little bit more into Artaxerxes Letter.
在今天的聚会，我们会学习以斯拉记的第7章，我们会看这个亚达薛西王的谕旨。
But before we delve into that, we'll give a very brief summary or introduction to the chapter first.
我们先开始学习之前，会有一个先看一下这一章是说什么的。
So if we've been reading, following the schedule of the church, we know that obviously last week we learned about Ezra Chapter 6.
如果我们有跟教会的安排的话，我们上个礼拜就会学到以斯拉记的第6章。
And in Ezra Chapter 6, we learnt how finally the temple in Jerusalem was rebuilt despite the many obstacles that Zerubbabel and the people encountered from their environment, from their surroundings.
在第6章里面，我们学到了这些所罗巴伯还有跟随他的人遇到很多的困难，他们终于把圣殿重建了。
And we see that the temple was dedicated and the Passover feast was celebrated as well.
他们献殿呢，而且过了逾越节。
And actually, Chapter 6 concludes the first part of this, or first section of this of the book of Ezra.
以斯拉记的第6章其实就是以斯拉记里面的第一个部分。
So it concludes the events with the first set of captives that returned from exile.
就是第一批被掳归回的人所发生的事情。
And from Ezra Chapter 7 to Chapter 10, we start to learn about the second set of exiles that return back to Jerusalem.
以斯拉记的第7到第10章就是第二批被掳归回的人所发生的事情。
So between Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, it's estimated it was about 58 years difference between the two.
在第6到第7章的中间大概隔了58年的时间。
And when we start the events in Chapter 7, we see that Darius is no longer king, and now it is Artaxerxes.
在第7章开始的时候，我们知道大利乌不再是王了，现在是亚达薛西王。
So Chapter 7 itself can be divided roughly into two parts.
第7章可以分为2个部分。
And the first part is from verse 1 to 10, which is talking about an introduction into Ezra's arrival in Jerusalem.
第一个部分就是第1到第10节，就是说以斯拉回到耶路撒冷的事情。
And then from verse 11 to 28 is the second part, and it's the letter of Artaxerxes' letter to Ezra.
在第11到之后的章节，就是说亚达薛西王的信。
So from verse 1 to the first part, from verse 1 to verse 10, where it tells us, gives us an introduction to Ezra.
在第1到第10节，就是第一个部分，就告诉我们谁是以斯拉。
We see that he arrives into Jerusalem in the 5th month during the 7th year of Artaxerxes' reign.
他在王的第7年5月就到了耶路撒冷。
And from verse 6, we can see that all of this could only take place because the hand of the Lord was upon him.
我们知道为什么这会发生呢？是因为耶和华他神的手帮助他。
And we see that Ezra was chosen by God to do a very important work for him.
我们知道以斯拉是被神所拣选的，要为他做很重要的工作。
So why was Ezra chosen?
为什么他会被拣选呢？
Let's read verse 10.
我们看第10节。
Ezra Chapter 7, verse 10.
以斯拉记的第7章第10节。
In the name of Jesus, I'd read Ezra Chapter 7, verse 10. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach statutes and ordinances in Israel.
第10节，以斯拉定志考究遵行耶和华的律法，又照律例典章教训以色列人。
So from this verse, we can see that Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach the statutes and ordinances.
我们知道，在这一章看到以斯拉是定志要遵行耶和华的律法，又让这些去行，而且是去教训人。
And similarly, for us today, if we want to carry out the work of God, we too have to follow this example of Ezra.
就像我们今天，如果我们想去做神的工作的话，我们就要像以斯拉一样。
We need to firstly prepare our heart to seek the law of the Lord.
我们首先要准备我们的心去学习耶和华的律法。
So it's very good that we all take the time out to observe and keep the Sabbath day.
我们来到安息日去遵守神的话语是很好的。
This is probably the most basic level that we can show that we are seeking the law of the Lord.
这是一个最基本的，让我们知道我们是去寻求神的律法。
To attend the services and fellowships, to listen to His words and share and encourage one another.
来到聚会，参加团契，去分享，鼓励大家。
But do we think if just attending the Sabbath once a week, or maybe attending the two convocations that we have each year, is enough to show a desire to seek the law of the Lord?
但是我们如果想说我们是寻求耶和华的律法的话，我们只是一个礼拜有一天来参加安息日的聚会，或者是一年里面有2次参加灵恩会是足够吗？
If we desire to have a comfortable retirement or we want the best for our children, do we spend just one day a week pursuing this?
如果我们想要很好的退休生活，或是我们要给我们儿女很好的东西，我们会只是一个礼拜一天去追求吗？
So we can see how if we truly want to desire to seek the law of the Lord, we need to make sure that this is something that we are doing every day.
所以如果我们是定志要考究耶和华的律法的话，我们是要每天去做的。
That is, we can nowadays we're very fortunate that there are many online services that we can listen back to.
今天我们很好的就是有很多网上的聚会，我们可以去听。
And of course, we have to remember our daily self-cultivation of reading the Bible and praying.
我们每天都要灵修去祷告，还有读圣经。
And always there is time to reflect and meditate on the words of God.
我们要去思想神的话语。
So it's important that we remember to seek the law of the Lord, not just on the Sabbath, but each and every day of our lives.
我们要记得，我们不可以只在安息日去学习神的话语，而是要每一天去学习。
And we've probably experienced ourselves that when we go to do something using ourselves, we tend to remember it more than if it's done for us.
如果我们是自己去做一件事情的话，我们通常都会容易去记得。
So if we go to study God's words, we will remember it and take it in a lot better than if we are just listening to His word.
如果我们是自己去学习、自己去寻求的话，我们会比只是听的话更容易去记得。
So you can see the second thing that Ezra did was that not only did he seek the law of the Lord, but he also went to do it as well.
我们看到以斯拉除了是学习神的话语，他也去行。
So once we know what God's words are, it's important that we carry them out, put them into practice into our daily lives.
当我们知道神的律法是怎样的话，我们很需要在我们日常生活中行出来。
And finally, we can then see Ezra is then able to teach the statutes and the ordinances in Israel.
那我们之后看到以斯拉可以将律例典章教训以色列人。
So we can't teach if we don't know God's words.
我们如果是不知道神的话语的话，我们就不可以教训人。
We can't teach effectively if we are not able to put what we are teaching into practice.
如果我们自己没有去行的话，我们就不可以有效的去教训人。
It's important that we are able to set first the example for what we are trying to teach others.
我们如果要教训人的话，我们先要有一个好的例子。
And this is not something that is just solely the responsibility or down to maybe a sermonizer or an RE teacher.
这不是只有宗教教育的教员，还有讲道的人的责任。
As parents, as brothers and sisters, we can teach our children, we can teach our brothers and the brothers and sisters around us as well.
我们作为家长，作为教会的弟兄姐妹，其实我们是可以教我们的儿女，教导我们身边的弟兄姐妹。
And we can do this from our interactions and our conversations with one another.
我们可以透过我们跟别人的沟通交流去教训人。
If we tell our children if we want our children to draw closer to God,
如果我们想要我们的子女去亲近神，
but if they don't see us doing it ourselves, how can we expect them to meet our expectation?
但是我们自己没有这样做的话，我们怎么期待他们可以得到我们的期望呢？
So if we are able to carry out all these three aspects that Ezra showed in this verse,
如果我们可以像以斯拉这样行这3件事的话，
to seek the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach the statutes and ordinances,
去考究遵行耶和华的律法，有仗律例顶章教训人，
then just like Ezra, God will be able to use us to carry out his work.
就好像以斯拉一样，神就可以用我们去帮助他做他的工。
So let's look a little bit more into the letter that Artaxerxes wrote to Ezra now.
我们可以继续去看这个亚达薛西王写给以斯拉的谕旨，
And this is from verse 11 to the end of chapter in 28.
就是11到28节。
So we see that Ezra was a priest, and he was a very skilled scribe.
我们知道以斯拉是个祭司，他是一个很有智慧的文士。
But likely he was one of many of these people throughout the kingdom of Persia.
但是其实波斯里面也有很多有智慧的文士。
However, he must have distinguished himself before Artaxerxes to be given this letter of great authority.
但是他一定是很特别的，所以亚达薛西王才给这个这么有能力的信给他。
So let's see what enabled him to stand out from his peers.
我们就会来看一下为什么他会这么特殊了。
Let's look at verse 11.
我们看第11节，
Ezra Chapter 7, verse 11.
以斯拉记的第7章11节。
So, verse 11, this is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave Ezra the priest, the scribe, expert in the words of the commandments of the Lord and of his statutes to Israel.
11节，祭司以斯拉是通达耶和华诫命和是以色列之律法的文士。
So what set Ezra apart was that he was an expert in the words of the commandments of the Lord and of his statutes.
那为什么以斯拉是这么的特殊了？是因为他是通达耶和华诫命，还有是以色列之律法的文士。
So today, although we live in the world, we know that we are not of this world.
我们知道今天我们住在世上，但是我们不属于世上。
Once we have been baptized, we have then been given a unique status as the children of God.
我们洗礼之后就有一个很特别的身份，就是神的儿女。
And this sets us apart from the people of this world.
那我们就跟世上的人分别出来。
And with it, it comes its own responsibilities as well.
我们就有一个特别的责任。
We know in Matthew chapter 5, we're always reminded to be the light of the world and shine before men that they may see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven.
我们在马太福音的第5章就知道，我们要做世上的光，要叫别人，让别人看到我们的好行为，还有荣耀神。
So as the children of God, we need to distinguish ourselves from the people of the world.
在作为神的儿女，我们要跟世上的人分别出来。
But we don't do this in pursuing a status or wealth or worldly knowledge.
我们不是要透过追求世界的名利来分别出来。
We do it by seeking to become an expert in the words of the commandments of the Lord and of his statutes.
我们是要变成好像以斯拉一样，是通达耶和华的诫命的，还有律例的人。
So this is something that we need to keep in our minds each and every day.
我们需要把这些记在我们的每一天的生活中。
to constantly strive to build up a greater and deeper knowledge of God's words.
我们要追寻去更了解神的话语，
To never stop learning them or moving forward in our faith.
不要停止去学习，还有停止去在信仰上进步。
Because if we ever start to become complacent or even lukewarm in our faith, then we will end up just like the church in Laodicea in Revelation chapter 3 and be vomited out.
如果我们好像启示录里面的老底嘉教会，我们信仰变成温水一样，我们就会被神吐出来。
So if we look back, if we look at the letter that Artaxerxes wrote, we see the task that has been entrusted to him from the king.
我们可以再看回来，亚达薛西给以斯拉的谕旨，我们就知道他有一个工作要做。
In verse 13 and 27, we're told what Artaxerxes asks of or tasks Ezra to do.
我们在13还有到27节就看到亚达薛西要以斯拉所做的事。
So we see that Artaxerxes wants him to go up to Jerusalem, and it is in order to beautify the house of the Lord.
我们知道他要以斯拉去耶路撒冷去修建神的殿。
So in the rest of the letter, we'll find out what else Artaxerxes wants Ezra to do in order to achieve this, and also why he has asked Ezra to do this.
我们在这个谕旨之后就可以看到他要他做的事情是什么，还有原因是什么。
And a lot of these tasks that Artaxerxes has set for Ezra are things that we can do as well, or we should be doing as well.
那这些事情其实是我们都应该要做的事情。
Because we know that God is our king.
我们知道神是我们的王。
And we know that from Revelations that we are now spiritual priests once we have been baptized.
我们在启示录里面知道，当我们受死之后，我们在属灵上就是祭司。
So with the role of a priest given us today, God too has entrusted us with many of the same tasks that Ezra was entrusted with.
我们作为一个祭司，我们就跟以斯拉一样，神也是给我们很多不同的工作。
And with these tasks, we will be able to help beautify the temple of the house of the Lord.
这些事情就可以让我们去修建神的殿。
So let's have a look at verse 13.
我们看一下13节。
If we look at verse 13.
13节。
I issue a decree that all those of the people of Israel and the priests and Levites in my realm who volunteer to go up to Jerusalem may go with you.
13节，住在我国中的以色列人、祭司、利未人，凡甘心上耶路撒冷去的，我暂时准你们，他们与你同去。
So here we see that Artaxerxes will allow those who volunteer to go to Jerusalem will be able to go with Ezra.
在这里，我们看到这个王允许甘心上耶路撒冷的人跟以斯拉同去。
So the important point here is that they volunteer, or they're willing to go and do this work.
我们知道这里的重点是他们是甘心去耶路撒冷，还有甘心去为神工作。
So today, when we come to the church, we also need this willingness to come and not feel obliged or forced to come to church.
我们今天来到教会，也要像他们一样是甘心去做，而不是觉得被强迫。
Only when we are doing it willingly will then our work be acceptable to God.
只有我们是甘心去为神工作，神才会去接纳我们所做的工。
However, this willing heart or willingness is not just limited to to assign church works.
这个甘心去做的，不只是一些被安排去做的工作。
We are also measured on our willingness in order to keep and follow God's commandments and God's teachings.
我们也要去 看我们是不是甘心去学习，还有行神的话语。
So what is the feeling that we have when we come and attend the Sabbath day?
我们来到教会去守安息日的时候，我们要有什么的感想呢？
Are we joyful and happy to have another opportunity to share and fellowship with one another?
我们是觉得很开心，我们有机会来团契，跟别人去分享吗？
Or are we counting down the minutes until we can leave church and go home and do our own thing?
还是我们去倒数，我们什么时候可以离开回家做我们的事情？
So it's important that we always take the time to reflect on what our willingness is in order to keep God's commandments and God's teachings.
我们应该要去思考一下，我们是有多甘心去做神的事情。
What heart do we have for the matters of the church?
我们对教会的事情有什么的心态呢？
If we want to carry out our role as priests faithfully, then we have to make sure that in all that we do, it's with a willing heart.
我们如果想做个忠心的祭司，我们要去在我们做的工上，我们都是要甘心去做。
So from verse 15 to 16, we can see another task that is entrusted to Ezra.
第15到16章，16节，我们看到以斯拉被安排的工作。
So in verse 15 to 16, we see that Ezra was entrusted with all the silver and gold, the freewill offerings from the king, the counselors, and the people.
在15节，我们看到又带金银，就是王和谋士甘心献给住耶路撒冷以色列神的。
And all of these things were to be offered for the house of God in Israel, in Jerusalem. Sorry.
就是为在耶路撒冷的神所献的。
So for us today, we might not be the financial affairs of the church and may not have so much dealings with the money and the financial dealings of the church.
在今天，我们可能不是财务，我们不需要这样处理教会的钱。
But actually, we all still have a responsibility in making sure that we are looking after the what has been offered to the church and to God.
但是我们也需要去好好的教料什么是被奉献给教会的。
So the members or offer in order the offerings from the members will help the running of the church.
信徒所奉献给教会的，可以让教会去运作。
The electricity, the food that we have, the notepads, the pens, pencils that we use, they are all provided for by the church and from the offerings given by the members.
我们现在在教会用的电器，还有食物，还有文具，其实都是由信徒奉献给教会的。
So when we use the things of the church, how careful are we of using them?
当我们用教会的东西的时候，我们是不是很小心去用呢？
Are we careful not to be wasteful?
我们有没有不要浪费？
Are we careful to look after the hoovers, the equipment that is that we use to help the church?
我们用好像是计时器的时候，我们有没有小心去用呢？
Treating them like we would treat our own possessions.
就像带我们自己的东西一样。
And we may even help the church at times by buying things for the church.
有时候我们可能帮教会买一些东西，
Maybe the ingredients for the meals, maybe the cleaning supplies, or even when we're traveling to other churches to help out in the church work.
可能是煮饭需要的材料，还是清洁用的东西，或者是我们要去其他教会去参加活动的时候。
Do we try and help the church save money by looking for offers or looking for the best value?
我们有没有帮教会去省钱呢？好像是看有没有一些优惠。
So every member has an opportunity to show more care and concern for the church by looking after the offerings that are given to the church.
每一个信徒都有机会去帮忙看信徒奉献给教会的金钱。
So if we now look at verse 17, we can see another task that was given to Ezra.
我们在17节可以看到另一个他要做的工作。
In verse 17, we see that Ezra was to be careful to buy with the money, the bulls, the rams and lambs, grain offerings and drink offerings.
17节我们看到他需要用这些钱去买公牛、公绵羊、绵羊羔和铜线的束祭奠祭祭物。
So we know that during Ezra's time, the offerings were something that was very important in order for the atonement of sin.
在以斯拉的时代，献祭是非常重要的，因为是帮百姓去赎罪的。
And these offerings had to be the best and without blemish in order to give a sweet aroma to God and be accepted by Him.
这些祭物是要最好的，没有瑕疵的，要让神去接纳。
And what else was important, or did God task His people with in order to offer to Him?
那除了这些以外，神还有看什么是献祭需要的。
Let's turn to Leviticus chapter 27.
我们看利未记的27章。
Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30.
利未记的27章13节。
Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30.
27章的13节，30节。
Verse 30, and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord.
地上所有的，无论是地上的种子，是树上的果子，1/10是耶和华的，是归给耶和华为圣的。
So we can see here that a tithe of the land all belong to the Lord.
我们知道这些东西都是属于神的。
And for us today, a tithe or a tenth of all we are given should be offered back to God.
我们知道今天我们要奉献1/10给神。
And a lot of the time we think it may just be in a monetary value, maybe just from our earnings.
有时候我们想这1/10就是我们所挣的钱。
But we should also be offering a tenth of our time in order to carry out and do His work.
但是这1/10其实也包括我们的时间，包括我们要去献时间给神。
Put our time in prayer, in reading the Bible, and cultivating ourselves.
用我们的时间去祷告，学习神的话语，去灵修。
In doing the various church works, helping out in the religious education or fellowships or visitation work.
做圣工，还有宗教教育团契。
So as the children of God today, as spiritual priests, it's important that we don't forget to offer our tithes today as well.
在我们今天做神的儿女，做一个祭司，我们也不要忘记奉献1/10。
So if we turn back to Ezra Chapter 7.
我们看回来以斯拉记的第7章。
Turn back to Ezra chapter 7 and let's look now at verse 19 and 20.
我们看以斯拉记的第7章19到20节。
So we can see another task that Ezra was given by Artaxerxes here.
我们知道亚达薛西也给以斯拉另外一个工作。
So Ezra was given the articles that were needed for the service of the house of God.
我们知道亚达薛西给圣殿中要使用的器皿给了以斯拉。
But also Ezra was told that if there was anything more that was needed for the house of God, he could have it from it could be paid for by the king's treasury.
以斯拉也被告知，若再有需要的经费，可以从王的谷库里支取。
So from our previous studies of 2 Kings, we can remember that the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar.
我们在列王记下学到圣殿是被这个尼布甲尼撒王破坏了。
And Nebuchadnezzar took away all the articles of bronze, silver, and gold.
他拿了所有的器皿，包括那个金还有银。
And we can see that in order to carry out the worship in the temple, there were articles that may be needed.
我们知道要恢复在圣殿里面去聚会的时候，有一些器皿是需要的。
And in 2 Kings, the account in 2 Kings where let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 25.
我们可以看列王记下的25章。
2 Kings chapter 25.
列王记下的25章。
2 Kings chapter 25 from verse 13 to 17.
我们在看13到17节的时候，
So in this passage we can see some of the things that were taken from the temple.
我们可以看到被从圣殿被拿走的器皿有什
So
么？
like the bronze sea, pots, shovels, trimmers, spoons, fire pans, basins.
好像是13到14节的铜海、锅、铲子、乐剪、调羹等等的。
So these were things that were used in, these were articles that were used in the temple.
这些器皿是要在圣殿里面去用的。
So we can look at these articles today as how we offer our service to God.
我们可以看这些器皿，就是今天我们要奉献给神的东西。
Do we and are we able to give our best and our all to God?
我们是不是把最好的、所有的都给神呢？
We can see that Artaxerxes provided all of these articles for Ezra and the people to use.
我们看到亚达薛西王把这些东西都给了以斯拉还有其他以色列人去用。
But also Artaxerxes instructed that if there was anything more that was needed, he would give it to them and from his own money, from his treasury.
亚达薛西也说了，如果再有需要的话，可以用王的钱去付钱。
So do we give our best and our all to God in our service to Him?
我们在服侍神的时候，我们要把我们最好的、我们所有的都给他吗？
Do we put a limit on what we give and what we offer to God?
还是我们写了个献祭去只给一部分给神呢？
And we've heard of members who members who are pensioners who were able to offer greatly to the members in Africa during the pandemic.
在疫情的时候，我们有听说一些已经领退休金的同龄，他们把很大部分的钱都奉献给非洲的同龄。
And we ourselves have probably experienced that when we offer to God, we are never short or lose out.
我们也可能有经历，就是我们奉献给神的话，我们不会有缺的。
We always must remember that everything that we have has been given to us from God.
我们要记得，我们所有的都是从神而来的。
He can give and He can take away at any time.
他可以给我们，也可以收取。
So whilst we are alive, we should take every opportunity. Whilst we are alive and well, we should take every opportunity to give our all and put in our best efforts into serving Him.
当我们今天还是生存的、还健康的时候，我们就应该把我们所有的都献给神。
And the more that we sow, the more we will reap.
在当我们撒种的比较多的时候，我们也收的同时也可以收很多。
So why did Artaxerxes spare no expense in order to help beautify the house of the Lord?
为什么这个亚达薛西王在献给神的这件事上没有献祭呢？
So in verse 27, we can see that this had been put into the king's heart by God.
我们在27节可以知道，这是因为神在王的心中去动工。
But we can also see in verse 23 the reason that Artaxerxes, his own reasoning for doing all of this.
我们在23节也可以看到亚达薛西他自己的原因。
To verse 23, whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it diligently be done for the house of the God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons?
13节，凡天上至神所吩咐的，当为天上至神的殿详细办理。为何使愤怒临到王和王众子的国呢？
So Artaxerxes spared no expense because he wanted to avoid the wrath of God.
那亚达薛西没有献祭，是因为他要避免神的愤怒。
He didn't want his kingdom and he didn't want his sons to face this wrath.
他不想要他的王还有他的众子受到这样的愤怒。
So likewise, if we do not want to face the wrath of God,
所以当我们不想面对神的愤怒，
then we need to help and beautify the church of God.
我们就应该帮忙去修建神的殿。
by helping in whatever way possible to allow the church to grow and prosper.
无论在什么方面，我们都可以帮助教会去成长。
And as priests, we need to remember that we are there to serve God and to serve the people, in other words, to serve the brothers and sisters around us.
我们作为一个祭司，就是要服侍神，还有服侍我们的弟兄姐妹。
If there is someone in need, we ought to try our best to help and meet that need.
如果我们看到别人有需要的话，我们都应该去尽量帮忙。
Many of us would have been asked to help out in various church works.
我们可能在教会不同的工作也被安排去帮忙。
We would not have been identified to help if those people didn't feel we were capable or able to help out in this work.
我们被安排就是因为别人看到我们是有能力去做这个工。
So before we are very quickly to say no or reject it, let's take a pause and think maybe we should give it a try.
当我们想要拒绝的时候，可能我们要停一停，想一下，我们应该去试一试。
Let us remember that we are priests there to serve God.
我们要记得，我们是祭司，我们要去侍奉神。
So we can show God our faithfulness and our love for Him by making sure that we spare no expense in carrying out His work.
我们要让神知道我们的信心，我们对他的爱，我们不要为做他的工而献祭。
So if we move on to verse 24 now.
如果我们继续去看24节
In verse 24, we see something that Artaxerxes and another instruction that was given to Ezra from Artaxerxes.
我们在24节可以看到亚达薛西王给以斯拉的另外一个旨意。
Verse 24, Also we inform you that it shall not be lawful to impose tax, tribute, or custom on any of the priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, Nephilim, or servants of this house of God.
24节，我要巧谕你们，至于祭司、利未人、歌唱的、守门的和尼提林，并在神殿当差的人，不可叫他们进贡、交课、利税。
So Artaxerxes does not allow these groups of people to have any sort of tax, tribute, or custom.
那亚达薛西命这些人不可叫他们进贡、交课、利税。
We know that tax, tribute, and customs were financial payments that were given by the people of the land to the rulers of the land.
我们知道交税就是要给这个政府去交我们的金钱。
And today we know that those who are working know that we have to pay tax to the government.
我们今天如果有工作的话，我们也要给政府交税。
We have members who are from all around the world.
我们今天有不同的信徒，他们从世界各地来的。
And a few of the comments I hear is that the tax in the UK is very high.
我经常听到别人说，就是在英国的税是很高的。
So we have members from recently from Hong Kong and Australia, and I'm sure they can appreciate how much less tax they paid when they were in their respective countries.
我们现在有信徒是从香港还有澳洲来的，他们就可以知道，就是他们当地的税是很低，就是不同的。
So we can all appreciate that our lives would be a little bit easier if we had to pay less tax.
如果我们可以给小一点的税的话，我们的生活可能会更容易一点。
Especially now with the cost of living being so high, anywhere where we can save is going to put less financial pressure onto us.
尤其是当我们今天生活的成本越来越高的时候，如果我们有一些地方可以省钱的话，我们的生活就没有这么的困难。
So if we look at this from a spiritual aspect, what could it mean?
在属灵方面，我们可以学到什么呢？
So we can think that how we should not put any additional burden on our fellow brothers and sisters in the church.
我们可以学习到，就是我们不要给弟兄姐妹一些额外的压力。
It's a lot of time we should think about what we are able to do within our own abilities.
我们应该先去想我们自己的能力可以做到什么事情。
To do as much as we can before we ask others to and put more onto their workload.
我们应该先自己做到可以做的事情，然后才叫别人去帮忙。
So maybe could we arrange our own accommodation before we arrive at another place?
如果我们去另外一个地方，我们可不可以自己去安排住在哪里呢
？Arrange our own accommodation before asking the church for help.
我们先自己安排，之后才叫教会去帮忙。
Could we maybe take public transport rather than ask someone for a lift?
我们可不可以自己去做交通工具，然后才叫别人去帮忙呢
？Of course, we don't forget that these are opportunities for us to show our love and care and concern to the other members.
当然，我们不可以忘记，这个是一个好机会，让我们弟兄姐妹感受到我们的爱。
And by doing so, God will not forget our efforts and our labors and will bless us for it.
我们这样的服侍，神不会去忘记的，而且会祝福我们。
But we are reminded in Galatians Chapter 2 that we should not look out just for our own interests, but also for the interests of others.
在加拉太书第2章里面，我们学到的，我们不可以只顾自己要的，还是要顾别人的。
So we should try and think of what we are asking of other people, whether or not it will be putting an extra burden on them.
当我们去要别人去帮忙的时候，我们想一想，我们是不是会让他们有更大的压力了
？To be considerate of one another, as we may not know what circumstances they may be in.
我们可能不知道别人现在处在什么的环境。
Could what we be asking of them inadvertently actually put an additional burden on them?
我们叫他们帮忙的时候，可能会无意之间让他们有更大的压力。
So the final task I'd like to share about today is in verse 26.
在今天我最后要分享以斯拉要做的工是在26节。
In verse 26, it says, "Whoever will not observe the law of your God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily on him, whether it be death or banishment or confiscation of goods or imprisonment."
16节，凡不遵行你神律法和王命令的人，当书的定他的罪，或致死，或充军，或敲诈，或囚禁。
So here, Artaxerxes has instructed Ezra that anyone who does not observe the law of God or the law of the king will have judgment be brought upon them.
这里亚达薛西王告诉以斯拉，如果不遵守神的律法还有王命令的人，就可以定他的罪。
So Ezra had this authority to carry out judgment on behalf of the king.
以斯拉有这样的权利为王去定人罪。
If we turn to look at John Chapter 3.
我们如果看约翰福音的第3章。
John Chapter 3 verse 18.
约翰福音第3章18节。
John Chapter 3 verse 18.
约翰福音第3章18节。
He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
18节，信他的人不被定罪，不信的人罪已经定了，因为他不信神独生子的名。
So the words that Jesus spoke and the teachings he gave during his ministry has the power to save and give life.
耶稣在传福音的时候，他所说的话可以去定人罪，还有可以给人永生。
As we all know and were reminded that we all have a sin from our ancestor Adam.
我们都知道，我们从我们的祖先亚当里面就有罪了。
And we were reminded yesterday how we have to rebuild the old ruins and rebuild our relationships with God.
在昨天晚上，我们也学到了，我们要去重建我们跟神的关系。
So as the priests today, it's important that we uphold the law of God.
在今天，我们作为祭司，我们要去谨守遵行神的话。
and preach the gospel, the path of salvation to those people around us.
去传福音，让别人知道永生。
Because the words of Jesus carry great authority.
因为我们知道耶稣的话是大有能力的。
And so these words can carry God's judgment.
这些话语是有神可以定罪的能力。
Those who believe in these words will not be condemned.
信他的人不被定罪。
But those who do not believe are condemned.
不信的人罪已经定了。
So we can see how powerful the words of Jesus are.
我们知道耶稣的话是大有能力。
So it's important that we remember that Jesus is coming again very soon.
我们要记得耶稣再来的日子很近了。
And when he comes again, he will judge the whole world and the people in it, whether we are alive or not.
当他再来的时候，无论我们是还在生，还是已经过世了，我们都会被审判。
And no one can escape this judgment.
没有人可以避过这个审判。
And the outcome of this judgment will either be eternity, joy and peace in heaven, or eternal suffering and pain in hell.
审判的结果就是我们可以到天国去享永生，还是我们要在地狱受永刑。
So we can think about what else we are able to do in order to help the people around us and ourselves uphold the law of the Lord.
我们可以想一下，我们有什么可以做，让我们自己还有身边的人可以守神的话语。
To help the people around us to be saved and not be condemned.
帮助我们身边的人可以被救，不是被刑罚。
So in conclusion, we see that this letter from Artaxerxes gave Ezra and entrusted Ezra with many tasks.
那总结来说，我们知道这个亚达薛西的谕旨给了以色列很多的东西要做，还有他的权利。
And these were carried out in order to beautify the temple of the Lord.
这些要做的事情都是为了要收拾耶和华的殿。
So we can learn for ourselves today that we should have a willing heart in all that we do for God.
我们知道，当我们要侍奉神的时候，我们是要甘心去做。
That we should also look after all the offerings of the church.
我们要小心看管神的财物。
We must not forget to offer our tithes.
我们不要忘记奉献我们的时间。
To also make sure that we do our best and give our all to God.
我们要把最好全部给神。
To try not to burden our fellow brothers and sisters.
不要让我们其他的弟兄姐妹增加压力。
And to uphold the law of God and preach so that more people can be saved.
我们要谨守遵行神的话语，要教导别人，让更多的人可以得救。
And it's important to remember that these tasks are not just set for us to be done within the church.
我们記得這些東西不是只在教會裡面去做。
These are things that actually are applicable to us in our daily lives, in our homes and in our workplaces.
這些事情是在我們日常的生活，在我們的家庭、我們的工作裡面要去行的。
Because being a true Christian is not just a one day a week thing.
作為一個真正的基督徒，不是一個禮拜只做一天的事情。
It is making sure that we are faithful and obedient to God each and every single day of our lives.
我們對神的忠心是每一天都要的。
So by doing all of these tasks, then we too can avoid the wrath that Artaxerxes was worried about.
我們去這樣行的話，我們就可以避過亞達薛西所擔心的憤怒。
So that ends my sharing today.
所以這是我今天的分享。